this is the real deal here. We've never actually spoken. You just got in touch with me about the boards, and we kind of met through forums online, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I'd seen some of your videos on YouTube, and I'd actually pointed people to you sometimes, and they were asking about various things. You at some point you did a small review of hard boots versus soft boots for touring,
Yeah,
and somebody
yeah,
was asking me about that, and I said, "Oh, it's a pretty down to earth, easy going, like you're not trying to flog anything, opinion on whether applicable." I said, "Go watch that."
oh, cool.
And so, I kind of seen you around for a while, and then I'd seen you doing some board reviews, and I was like, you know what? I like the way this guy thinks. And I
Right.
think we have a similar style. We come from a carving background. And so I was like, you know what? I think this guy should try some of my boards. So I reached out.
Cool. We need to introduce you. So you're Corran Addison, and
Yeah.
people find you online under soulwaterman.com. Is that right?
Or soulstick.com. Yeah. So either
Or-
soulstick.com or soulwaterman.com. They're both active websites. They both
So
go to the same place.
the question instantly is, of course, I found you through soulwaterman.com. I'm going to get there in a second. I'm going to tell you how I actually I don't know whether you remember this, but I have a story how I found you actually, which I want to talk about. Um, but what was I saying? Yeah, Soul Waterman. Why Waterman? Tell
Well, I
us.
started off making both whitewater kayaks and paddle boards. So surfing paddle boards, whitewater kayaks, and then we were doing some surf paddleboard shapes. We were doing some racing paddleboard shapes. We were also doing surfboards. So I didn't want to call it soul kayaks or soul boards or soul whatever. And so Waterman just made sense, when I was doing that. So that was when I formed Soul back in 2015.
Oh
Uh,
wow.
and then which I've done a whole bunch of other kayak companies and paddleboard companies prior to that. I was the founder of Imagine Surf, which was eventually sold to the Pride Group.
No way.
So and a whole bunch of awards through Imagine Surf. And then I did Corran Sup, and before then I had Riot Kayaks, which was a whitewater company. But then in 2018, I tried, well, 2017, I tried a surfy snowboard for the first time. So I came from a hard boot racing background, and I did a little, freestyle and park, but it was never really my thing. I rode hard boots whether I was in these steep extremes or whether I was carving up on a race course. Um, and then tried a surfy shape, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. Because I kind of stopped snowboarding. I got into skis.
Mhm.
And I started skiing because I wanted a new challenge, right? And I never knew how to ski. So I learned how to ski. And then I was off in Austria and Italy and other places around the world skiing, and out west in Mammoth and places like that. And I tried these surfy shapes, and I fell in love immediately. And I started buying them. And I'd try a shape and I'd be like, oh, this is awesome. Ah, could be better. And I
Yeah.
would try something else. Oh, God, this is awesome. And then like 2 weeks later, could be better. And I went
Yeah.
through a whole bunch of different shapes. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to do my own. Because I used
Yeah.
to make boards back in the 90s.
Okay.
And then I was the designer for Oxygen snowboards for a while, also
No
back.
way. You
Yeah,
gotta be kidding. My
yeah. Well, I
first
wasn't the
board.
main designer. I was an advisory designer working with the main guys. I was on their pro team
My
and
first board was an XE52.
oh, no way. Okay, yeah. So yes,
Asymmetrical free
ASIMs,
carve.
yeah. At the time, before I got really steep at my angles, when we were riding like 45, 40 kind of angles, ASIM made sense, right? But then as soon as we got even more aggressive, then it didn't make sense anymore.
Yeah, right.
And, because I ended up 65, 60, um,
Yeah.
my stance angles, right? And then it didn't make sense anymore, and we left the ASIM shapes. But I don't know if you remember the Oxygen Dangerous.
No.
The race board, yeah, it was a titanium top sheet, 172. Anyway, I was involved with that, and
Wild. Yeah, Oxygen made some ridiculous stuff. For the people who don't know the brand, they were made by Atomic. It was
Mm,
Atomic Skis snowboard brand. And for some reason, they figured Atomic Skis won't work for snowboards. Nobody's going to buy it and call it Oxygen, only to then eventually call them Atomic snowboards. And those
yeah.
snowboards under the name Atomic were atomic. They were flippin' amazing.
Yeah, yeah, no, they were great. They were really, really good boards. And a number of brands did that, right? Like Dinostar bought Ocean,
Yeah, correct.
and then they killed Ocean and made them Dinostar boards,
Oh,
which
so dumb.
kind of flopped because Ocean was a known brand anyway.
Yeah.
You know, there's 100 stories like that in the snowboard and ski
That's
industry that
sick.
you're just the head scratchers.
I had no idea that you were involved there. So here's a funny story. The other day, I am on the chairlift with a local here who is in very much into whitewater sports like kayaking and stuff. And he had seen me on the hill before trying your boards. And he's like, "Oh, so you got boards from Corran Addison?" And I'm like, "How do you know?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, he's a well-known figure." And I'm like, "How in the world do you know?" Because he's a passionate snowboarder, but he's not someone that strikes me as someone who's super involved in snowboarding. But he knew of your boards. They are pretty visible in the bright red, right? And the shapes. And said like, "Yeah, this man is very famous in kayak world. He constantly comes up with ideas that go completely against the grain, only to then get them stolen from a big brand because he's genius and the shit he does works." And I was like, interesting. And I said to him, "You know what? That's funny because the boards are also somewhat backwards from what I perceive as like what works for me or what I think makes the most sense, however." And his response was, "Oh yeah, I can totally see that. That's him. That would be him to make a board that is totally different from other boards." So I thought that was really funny. But before we talk about the three boards, I think there's something super cool that I want to share here. The first time I read your name was on some Facebook page. I have no clue where it was. Honestly, it's years and years ago when I was still working in well, years and years ago, let's say probably 7, 8 years ago.
Mm,
I was still working in a board shop here, Edge of the World, as a hard goods buyer. And of course, we sold kids' boards as well. And you know where this is going. And I had been just shaking my head at all these kids' boards forever, right? Like all these triple beveled, like no security, just dishes that spin. And yeah, this is great because the kids don't catch edges, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just, oh my God, this is like, no, 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 no. Reason being, as you know and stated in the Facebook post, catchy is not good, but control is good.
mm,
And some form of, well, developing a relationship to that snowboard, as in that it does have edges and that you should use them to do certain things.
yeah.
And that therefore we need to actually design a snowboard that is like a snowboard, but applicable for children. And you posted a story that led to you making kids boards. And then you also posted, I think it was your little boy,
Yeah.
like the kid ripping, right? Like carving turns on a swallowtail the size of himself. And I was like, I read your text and I very vividly remember all the words as well because you just nailed it. You described them. Maybe you described this for us rather than me. Like, what were you observing on the bunny hill, and how did you then work around that in your kid sports designs? That's the moment when I thought, oh, thank God, there's someone else with a brain, and he actually put that into action. So tell us about this.
So, So when I started he was 2 years old when I started my son, and I started him on skis because I thought it would just make more sense for him to fall in love with snow sports on skis, where you can do the pizza and you tie the front up and stuff like that. And I'd watched, little kids learning on the bunny hills, and it was a crash fest, right? It was helicopter to crash, helicopter to crash. And I was like, yeah, that doesn't look like it's something that's going to be appealing and it's going to make my son want to go, right? So I put him on skis, and that lasted about 2 weeks.
Right.
And he saw a snowboard, and he couldn't even talk really yet. Like, it was before he could talk. And he looked at me, and he's like pulling on my coat. He goes, dada, 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 dada. I'm like, snowboard. Ah. And so he saw snowboards, and he was like, fuck this, I want to do that. And I just spent like $800 on, because I bought the best ski stuff that you can buy for a kid that size. Like,
Yeah.
I found the ski with the best flex patterns, and it was all expensive shit. And it was like 3 weeks in, and I'm just like, okay, fine. So I bought him a board. I think I got him the Burton Cricket or something with their binding in the board and the whole thing. And I took him out to the hill, and it was a helicopter fest where he would start to go and he would just spin. Like, as soon as he tried to turn, the board would just do a 360 or more, and he would crash. And he would stand up, and he couldn't keep the board straight. It's doing this, and then it would spin one way or spin the other way. And he wasn't catching edges. He just couldn't control the board. And I'm sitting at the bottom of the hill, and I'm watching this, and I'm watching every other kid doing the same thing.
Yeah.
There were 30 of them out there, and it was like zing, crash, zing, crash. So I'm like, okay, there's something fundamentally wrong with the shape of kids' boards. I hadn't really looked at them. I hadn't looked at them to see if they were different from an adult board or if they were just scaled down. But either way, they weren't working for kids. And then I realized they were like, putting 3D base all the way down or beveling the edges, or, all kinds of stuff they were doing. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense. And then the ones who were kind of getting it were in this falling leaf thing. And they couldn't get out of this falling leaf because it was set up duck with the board that is the same width on both ends, so it doesn't want to turn either way. And they would just do this down the slope. And if they got stuck on it, if they did make it to the toe side, they could never get back around again because they were just too scared to catch an edge, right? And they'd end up sitting down, rolling over onto their back, and standing up.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, this is completely wrong, right? And I thought, what works for me? And I was like, the difference of going from a twin tip to a shape-shifted board that has a wider nose and a tail, that is set back, that as soon as the board starts to move, it wants to turn. Immediately it wants to turn, and it wants to do the 180 because you have this shape-shifted form to it, right? With camber, so that, a millimeter or two, because they weigh 30 pounds, but on a really, really flexible board, super flexible. That was the other thing, is these boards were all way too stiff because they were making them too thick to use standard inserts. So the kids couldn't flex them, so they would just build rocker into them because they couldn't flex them, right?
Pretty much. You got it. It's like, right? It's so awesome to hear, because I literally agree with every single word. And I had been thinking this, like, these exact same things forever, from an instructor background, working with kids myself, looking at kids on bunny hills. Maybe for a toddler that you're pulling around, that kind of shape works for them to get an idea of gliding sideways. But as soon as you let them go, like let go of them and get them to do something on their own, exactly what you're describing happens. And what I thought was so interesting about your approach there was that you picked up on taper, because that's so true. Like a tapered board, and this is probably also something that is kind of nice and valuable for my kind of channel content and my audience. That's another effect of taper. Like I'm sometimes talking of like, too much taper makes the tail a bit washy. But that is exactly that kind of turn that is super beneficial for a beginner. Like the tail wants to come around, the nose wants to steer, the tail wants to slide a bit, boom, you're turning, rather than just falling leafing. And your idea of camber, this preload, if it's very appropriate to the rider's weight, is just helping you. It's not against you, it's helping you. right? It just cannot be too stiff.
So
And
that's
then
the
you
thing, right?
set
So we
out,
had to specially make inserts
yeah,
that were small enough. Like, there was all kinds of things that we had to specially make to make this work.
mm,
But it was game changing for my son. It was absolutely game changing. This it was a 105 swallowtail, long nose, right? So that we could start playing around in powder. And the same thing when we got into little bumps and stuff, the nose would want to go over everything.
yeah.
A little bit of taper. No, it was like 5 mils of taper, but just enough setback, but just enough taper to make it one. And then I set him up posy, not aggressively, but just enough. So the flat back foot flat enough to where he had brakes, but turned forward enough to where he could get his hips and his shoulders into the turn. And his first day on, so he never connected two turns when he was on a twin tip. And his first day on the 105 swallowtail, within 15 minutes, he was linking 3 or 4 turns in a row before falling.
Oh, wow.
Right? Day one, right?
So
On that.
another golden point you just made there, you set him up posy with little enough angle for him to just have to still have brakes. That's what you just said. This is
Yeah.
also so important for people to understand. Like my perception of going too crazy posy, that's why I don't recommend that to beginners ever, is the fore aft movement through the feet. Sorry, the movement across the board through the soles of your feet has almost no effect when you're too
Mm.
posy.
Yeah,
Like
yeah. You want to have it flat, just enough to be able to get
totally.
your hips around, but no more.
Yes, totally. Oh, this is so awesome. Like
Yeah.
I literally I read this text and I thought like I reposted it and I talked about it in the shop. I like make that a big deal because I was like I can't believe that there's somebody else out there that didn't only make something like that didn't only understand the problem but then also made something and shows us that kid ripping on that board,
Mm.
right? So to me that was just like, oh, hallelujah. Like why does no major brand get this very simple thing? If you understand snowboarding, you would understand that just as an engineer for boards or whatever. So I'm wondering, oh, what is it? Is it really a wrong belief where people go, oh, but we don't know whether they're goofy or regular. It's got to be a twin tip. It's got to be this. It's got to be that. Is it that? Or is it a marketing thing that, that a 105 swallowtail looks silly? And it doesn't have to be a swallowtail. I don't know. But, like I just never understood this. I personally believe it is easier to learn to ride on a directional board if it's about turning, because at the end of the day, you will pick a side. It's
Hmm.
not like how many people, I don't know anyone who rides 50% switch, not a single person.
Hmm.
And even
So,
even the strong rail riders of this day and age don't ride 15-15 anymore.
yeah, they're slightly off. Exactly. No, I agree.
Yeah.
So here's a thing that we're my opinion on. We don't know if they're goofy or regular. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Okay. So yes, we will have a natural tendency to want to learn one way or the other,
Mhm.
right? Because we're naturally right foot forward or naturally left foot forward. And there's all kind of tests that you can do, pushing them and making them turn their bodies and lifting a hand, which will give you a good idea, but it's harder with a small kid, right?
Mhm.
But this is a lesson that I learned back in the ASIM oxygen days, right? So
Mhm.
I'm a regular footer, and I had 15 ASIM oxygen boards in my closet. And my brother, who was a goofy foot skateboarder and a goofy foot surfer, came out to live with me for the winter, and he wanted to learn to snowboard. And I only had regular foot boards. And I put him on a regular foot board, and he didn't take any longer to learn than anybody else I've taught.
Hmm.
He just got on it because he got on it, and I said, "This is how you turn. This is how you do things." And within maybe 2 hours, he was linking turns down the mountain, and within a few, because it was, we were on hard boots back then, because that's also all I had was hard boots at the time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I slackened everything off for him, but I put him in a pair of hard boots, and I, slightly slackened the angles, and within a day or two, he was carving turns regular foot, and he was goofy at everything else that he does. It didn't make the
Huh.
slightest bit of difference. And
Right.
today, then he eventually got into twin tips and all that kind of stuff, and he still rides regular foot, even though he went through a period of having symmetrical stance on a symmetrical board. He still rode left foot forward. He
Interesting.
rides goofy for everything
Yeah.
else.
Huh.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Doesn't. So if you're unsure, and if you really find that the kid just really absolutely keeps wanting to go the other way, just turn the bindings around. It's 10 minutes.
I know. I agree. Yeah.
I think the reason why they don't do it is laziness. I think it's lazy. I think it's easy to sell a twin tip board to a store because the store buyers are scared. They don't want to be stuck with inventory. It's already hard to sell kids stuff, right? And it's low margin stuff. So the last thing you want to be doing is getting something that, especially if dad is into park, right? Or mom is into park, they come in. What do they want to do? They want to put mini me on the same thing they're on, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's a part of it. But also, it's easy. You don't spend any time. You go, do you want the Spider-Man graphic or do you want the fairy graphic? Right? And the store buys the fairy, 10 fairies and 15 Spider-Mans, and you're done.
Bish bash
Right?
boss.
And it's a no-brainer for the sales reps, it's a no-brainer for the companies, and it's a no-brainer for the store buyer. And they perpetuate this dysfunctional system of teaching children. I mean, and they all learn eventually, right?
Yeah.
But it's a much longer process.
Yeah.
And, I think there was one case of somebody who bought the Swallowtail from me, the 105, who came back and said, no, my son who's having trouble turning on their twin tip and having all the problems that you said with the helicopter and stuff like that, got on it, didn't like it, got back on his twin tip, and then eventually figured it out. I think there was one.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Everybody else, it's an email, thank you, thank you, thank you. You've changed our lives.
I bet. I absolutely bet. So the recipe, in your opinion, to sum that up, is very mellow camber, very soft flex, therefore very thin board, a certain amount of taper to just make the tail break out a little easier and the nose steer easier, and
taper and slightly setback.
Yes. Yeah.
So
yeah.
So
And,
I did a swallowtail instead of doing tail rocker. And the reason and the tails were very flexible, right?
Right.
So that if they got back on the board, they had support back there. So if they got bumped back, there was support back there, right? Because it was a slightly longer, flat tail. But then once they start turning, then it would bend and it would allow the board to arc better through the turn naturally, right? It would help them turn the board on rail. But when they were flat, it gave them a bit of support. And it had just enough kick to where if they ended up going backwards, not in deep powder, but if they were like on a, just a groomer run and they had little fluffy stuff on it, just enough kick in the back to where they could go backwards. But I think the setback with the flatter tail also made a difference. But there's an argument for having a rocker tail that's not swallowed.
Yeah.
There's a solid argument for that too.
Yeah, cool. Essentially, it's just the things we said earlier. Yeah, I totally agree with that. It just makes more sense.
And he was 4 years old, carving turns, my son. Like layout carved, better heel than toe. His toe side wasn't as good. He tended to bend over, but anyway, doing these big side slashes, and he would switch. He would flip around, go switch, maybe make a turn or two switch, kind of just slidey turns, and then bring it back around and go back into carving. 4.
That's sick. Nice. Yeah. All right. Evidence, proven technology. I like it. So did the kids' boards, was that the first boards you made? Did that inspire you to make boards again?
No, the first board I made was the Pitchwing.
Oh, interesting.
But not the one that you had. So that was the second generation Pitchwing. So I rode a whole bunch of boards and owned a whole bunch of boards. I had a Gentem stick. I had a Moss Snow stick. I had a the Party Platter. I forget all the different boards that I had. So I went through And I also back in the day I had an original Sin 4807 and the 36 something or other, I forget what it was called, which
Yeah.
are also, directional shape-shifted boards that I still had that I then cut swallowtails into them. But the flex patterns were all wrong. They were old boards, right? And things had changed, technology had changed, and they were just heavy and dull feeling,
Yeah.
compared to some of the other stuff I wrote. But nothing really did it for me. And so, like I said, I was skiing and I put Kylix on skis, and then he saw this snowboarding and he wanted to do that. And I was like, well, if he's going to be on a snowboard, I'm going to get on a snowboard too. And by then, I'd already been doing these, riding these other boards and trying these other boards. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do a board, and I don't care if I sell them or not. Like, I'm going to go ahead and make a mold. And there was a factory that I worked with already doing other things in Asia that was making paddles for me and other carbon fiber things for me. And they made snowboards for, geez, they were a tiny factory, and I forget who it was. It was some offbeat brand that they were making, like a high-end offbeat brand. I forget what it was, that they were making their boards for them. I'm not there anymore. We outgrew them, but um, and I was like, fuck it. And so I did the design of the board and had them make one. And I got the first board like the last snowfall before the end of the season. I was like,
Oh,
the board's gonna arrive and the snow's gonna be gone. And we had like a 20 centimeter dump up in Quebec City, and I drove up to Quebec City with this board, and they groomed, like they had did a whole bunch of groomer slopes that they groomed after this dump, and I got on the slope and I did like the first 500 meters. I'll send you the video. I did the first 500 meters of this slope, and I came to a stop, and I was like, "Yes!" Like, this is awesome. It's everything that I wanted that I wasn't getting in the other boards, right?
oh, cool.
And then went off piste and went in the powder and played around with it. And I was like, God, this board is amazing. And a couple of friends tried it, and I think I made 10 boards, right? So I kept two for me, and then I sold eight of them, and I sold them all like that week to buddies of mine, right?
Mhm.
And I was like, wow, huh, I wonder. And then Kylix hit, by then I'd got him the Burton chicklets or crickets or whatever, I forget what it's called.
Yeah.
Um,
Chiclet is
and
different. Yeah.
So Kylix is my son, and he saw my board, and he's looking at his board, and he's looking at my board. He's like, Dada, Dada. And he's showing me the V-tail, and he's like, why am I on this thing? I want one of those, you know? So the first thing I did is I went and bought a really cheap old little kid's board, and I cut a V-tail into it. I was like, he'll be happy he's got a V-tail, right?
Yeah.
And so he finished the season on this cheap board where I just cut a tail into it and shortened up the back of the board, and I put new inserts in it, setting it back a little bit. But
Nice.
it was still this stiff, cambered, or rockered. It was junk, right?
Uh-huh.
And that summer, I designed the 105 for him, and then he had it at the beginning of the next season. He started off with it at the beginning of the next season, and it was instant. Um,
Cool.
so yeah, so I did my board first, and then I did his board. By which point, I then did a production run of like 150 pitch wings. It was one size only at the time, and I made like 150 of them. And by December, they were gone.
Oh, wow.
And I was like,
That's pretty
wow,
awesome.
okay, this could be a really good winter business to
Yeah.
substitute kayaking. And I was dropping out of the paddle boards and stuff because that market was getting really weird.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm going to get out of this before I end up losing a whole bunch of money in this because I could
Right.
just see it crashing. And then like 2 years later, the whole thing just imploded.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Sad, but yeah, I mean,
but I was glad I hadn't. I was glad I was out of it and I wasn't sitting on stock.
right.
You know.
Yeah.
And it just took off. I mean, I'm never going to be Burton. I'm not going to be, Nitro or whatever. It's like if I sell 800-900 boards a year, I'm stoked.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Totally.
that's a great year. Some years, it'll be 500-600. Other years are 8-9. It kind of goes up and down. It depends on what the flavor is. Depends on what other people are doing.
Mhm.
Um, so then I came out with a board called the Scrambler. There was a 150, very slashy, focus board. but they were all still flat bases. I wasn't doing any 3D bases and stuff because the factory I was at couldn't do it. They were like,
Mhm.
no, like we don't want to touch that,
Right.
Because they're hard. They're hard to make. They're hard to sand. They're like everything about it is hard. You have to adjust everything with your flex patterns because the compound curves makes it naturally stiffer, right? So
Thank
you have
you.
to adjust it for
Thank
that.
you. I'm talking about this. I did an episode about 3D, and I'm starting it talking about battalion because to me, in the mainstream of snowboarding, they were, to me, again, I might be wrong, the original guys. I know this technology existed
Mhm.
since the 70s,
Mhm.
like, or 60s. I don't know. People who rode down a hill on snow sideways figured that would be a good idea very early on. But in
Mhm.
mainstream, the first boards that I came across that were like 3D-ish were battalions.
Mhm.
So this video is apparently popular now for Lars bashing battalion, which was entirely not my intention. I'm actually saying that I think it's a genius idea that I just don't like it. Anyways, but I'm explaining in that thing that anything 3D messes with the flex pattern
Mhm.
and creates stiffness in areas where you actually, if you're doing it wrong, let's put it that way, or if you don't reflect on that enough, you are adding stiffness to a part of the board that you actually don't necessarily want to be that stiff.
Yeah.
Depends for what the board is being used.
Yeah.
And it's funny that like there's a million comments under that episode, opinions are being shared, which is awesome. But nobody has actually picked up on that particular part, which to me is the most important part of the
Mhm.
video. That I'm saying, because what I'm seeing often is the boards that have that, where the spooning, let's call it, goes very deeply into the effective edge. So the part of the board that you actually want to bend, that
Mhm.
those boards are then relatively soft in the middle
Yeah.
because you got to get the flex back somewhere. And
Yeah.
and for my purpose, for like a carving purpose, that's not a smart flex. Having the center bend, but the tip kind of
Yeah.
not, or much
Yeah.
less, or whatever, right? It's not a smart flex. So as much as it works, but it doesn't work at a high level. Steep terrain, aggressive carving, the center needs to be somewhat solid.
Yes. Yeah.
So anyhow, cool that you pick up that you just casually said that. I feel like nobody ever thinks about this. So
I was immediate. As soon as I started working on a 3D base, the first board I did with a 3D base was the blower.
yeah,
And there's all kinds of programs that you can use to test flex and stuff, right? On your CAD file, right? That you can do these tests. And initially I'd done the same kind of construction and the same sort of thicknesses. And I was doing these tests and all digital, and I'm like, and it was just getting a really weird reading. And I'm like, this is odd. And then immediately I'm like, well, hang on a second. It's a compound curve. And I stopped what I was doing and I trashed the entire design and I started again from zero because I like you can't just add a 3D base to your
yes,
concept. You have to design the entire board around the basis of it being 3D
pretty much.
from the ground up to allow for the fact that you want to have a progressive flex that gets stiffer as you get through to the center of the board, depending on what you want the board to do.
Exactly.
Being different from a groomer board, like the shift has a different flex pattern and it's much stiffer in the middle than the blower, which is overall softer because the idea is I want the blower to bend in blower. I want it to bend when there's nothing underneath you,
Ah, there you
right?
go.
So,
Okay.
so it has a very different flex pattern than the shift, which is
Interesting.
a groomer board that is awesome fun in powder. Was the
Yeah.
blower the powder board that I can carve, right? And
Ah,
groomer.
okay. This is interesting because obviously people are going to ask, well, first of all, we need to clarify which board you sent me, which boards, and then people are also going to wonder, like, well, what did you think about them? And what you just said about the blower, that's the first one that I wrote. I couldn't get over how soft it was. Like, I didn't write it in blower. I wrote it on groomers and in mixed variable terrain, and
Mm-hmm.
and I wrote it one morning and was like, no chance. Like the nose isn't strong enough to deal with variable firm terrain,
Mhm.
and neither is the tail if you move fore aft. And on a soft, smooth groomer, I felt like, okay, that kind of works. But even there, it was like I felt like it's very soft. And considering I'm very light, I was a bit like, that's strange. It's really soft. But that makes sense what you're saying. Yeah, if you want that thing to bend in powder, yeah, you gotta make a soft snowboard for sure.
But at the same time, I sent you a video the other day of me carving on, which is essentially bulletproof ice on the blower.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
So
yeah,
you can do it, but you got to have a Midas touch. You can't just jam it into the turn. You got to turn it on ice like you're in powder. So you got the Fukai,
yeah,
right? And then the blower. Let's not talk about the pitch wing yet, right? So the blower is 3D all the way to the front foot,
yeah,
right? And it gets progressively less, but it's 3D all the way. And the idea is that it's rolling rail to rail in powder,
yeah,
and it's pre-rocket at the rails, but it's got slight camber in the middle. So when it's flat, you've got a bit of spring in it, a little bit, but it's still very soft. And it's a powder board that works fine in groomer terrain, but it's the blower, right?
right.
Conversely, the Fukai only has a 3D base in the shovel.
Yeah, like past
It's,
effective edge.
it's flat from the contact point all
Yeah,
the way back, right?
yeah,
Because this is a board you're going to be taking into icy couloirs. You want to have maximum edge hold. It's only slightly shape shifted, so it's only slightly tapered. Right? It
yeah,
doesn't have a lot of taper to it. So it just helps you get into the turn, but it's nothing weird feeling. Because if you're in steep, sketchy terrain, you want something underneath you that you can absolutely trust. The nose is a little stiffer on it, so it doesn't fold on you. The camber on it's a little more pronounced, so it's got a little more spring. That's a board that basically is a flat base with just a little 3D in the nose, so that when you're in deep powder, because it's not overly wide, because then it's hard to get it on rail in icy conditions, it just helps it roll a little bit and helps it float a little bit
yeah.
without affecting the way the board handles in the terrain that it's intended to go,
Right,
right?
right, right, right.
And I think a lot of people, what they try to do is they try to make all their boards do everything,
Mm, yeah,
right?
I agree.
And I think that's a mistake. And I don't. Yes, technology and our ideas and our understanding of what makes a snowboard work is now so developed and so advanced compared to even 10 years ago, but especially 20 years ago, that even a dedicated powder board blower is still pretty fun to carve on groomer, right?
Mhm.
Even though that's not its goal. But I don't try to tell people this is a carving board. No, no, it's a powder board. But if you only have one board, or you started off in powder and now it's all tracked out and they just groomed the other side of the mountain, you can just go over there and you can carve all day and you're going to have a good time,
Yeah,
right? You're not going to have a problem. You don't have to go switch boards, right?
yeah,
Um, and so I think, like I'm very specific, like this board does that, this board does that, this board does that. No, they are not quiver killers. They don't do everything. And if you want that, go buy a Burton,
yeah, 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 yeah,
because they
right.
will do everything. Every board is great for the mountain and great for the park, and it'll go in the powder, and it's going to be your best friend, and it's an all-day driver as well as being your special board for those days.
Yeah,
Come
yeah, yeah. The
on.
descriptions often mean not much.
Yeah, and I'm not knocking Burton. Burton's a great company, and they've done so much for the sport. I'm not knocking them. That's just the name that came to mind. You
Well,
know,
it's the name that it's I agree. Like it's the name that always comes to mind, but it's also because everybody knows them. So if you use that as your standard example of a big brand with a big offering of boards, I think the point comes across. I'm also always hoping that's not being mistaken as like bashing the brand. It's literally just if there's one big brand in snowboarding that everybody knows, well, that's Burton.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So whatever.
So then, like the pitch wing, the one that you tried is the second generation pitch wing,
Mhm.
right? And I did that after I did the shift. So
Right.
the original pitch wing had 10 millimeters of taper. It was very aggressively cambered, contact point to contact point. Um, it was a very aggressive board. It was you had to ride it like you came off a race board. Now you've switched to soft boots, which is
All right.
exactly what I did, right?
Yeah.
And the Shift was a much more all-around, really good carver, really aggressive carver. The board that it's most compared to is the Karua Dot. That's
Okay.
the one that people compare it to the most. They're pretty different, but that's the closest one to the Shift. The Shift has a 3D base, which the Dot doesn't, right? But it's a very forgiving, user-friendly, everyman board for a directional, shape-shifted groomer carver that's also fun in powder. All right.
Hmm.
So I learned from that board, and then I took it over to the pitch wing that I didn't do a 3D base. It's flat base. It's camber, almost contact point to contact point, but not quite.
Right.
You know, I softened that up a little bit in the new version of the board. So it does start to have a little bit of early rocker, and that just softens up the experience. It's got 15 millimeters of taper instead of 10 millimeters of taper. So it's a little to compensate for the fact that now it has that little bit of early rocker in the front, right? So by
Hmm.
increasing the taper, it compensated for that, made it more forgiving, and I didn't lose any of the drive. Well, I feel like I didn't lose any of the drive.
Hmm.
And the original pitch wing is also an extremely front foot forward focused board. You had to be all over the front foot to make it turn. Whereas
Interesting.
the new pitch wing, you can be more centered on the board. You can ride it front foot heavy.
Yeah.
You can also ride it centered,
That
which
was
anybody coming off of a twin tip is going to be centered.
the pitch wing was my favorite of the three. I found the Fukai with your explanation makes a lot of sense. It also makes sense in my head as a deep pow like open terrain kind of board. Like not many bumps, kind of good smooth terrain type thing. I found in bumpy technical stuff, I kind of found, but that's also my weight to a degree,
Yeah, I
the
think
nose
so.
to be a little too stiff. Like I found the nose, was a bit like I had a bit too much resistance rather than bending it into and around a bump. It would kind of like talk back at me.
Yeah, you
Um,
need to be heavier. Like the Fukai comes alive at about 160, 160, 170 is when it comes alive, up to like 200,
that makes
205.
sense. Yeah.
That's where that board comes alive. So yeah, you're going to be light to it's going to be bucky.
Yeah, exactly. The nose,
Yeah,
the more so the nose. The tail is quite a bit softer than the nose, I found. Like maybe that comes from the fins, like
yeah, a little bit. Yes, a little
considering that
bit.
it's a cutout. But yeah, I noticed it in the nose more. The pitch wing felt nice. The pitch wing was nice to carve, was nice in powder. Yeah, it's like directional powder and groomers. Sweet, no
Mm.
worries. Yeah, that's a good one for sure.
I
I
mean,
agree.
it's
You can ride it surfy. You can ride it front foot heavy. It doesn't really matter.
yeah, and the thing is as well is I'm big on changing my angles and changing my stance width and stance setup for the conditions of the day. Like I don't have like this, oh, I always ride 20 inches at 32.15. I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
that's nonsense to me. It's like, what am I doing today? Oh, I'm gonna go, it's really hard pack and I'm gonna be ice carving all day. I'm rotating my front foot to 40 degrees, my back foot up to 18,
I do the same thing.
18.21, and
Yeah.
I'm going to bring my stance into 19 3/4, and I'm
Hmm.
going to shift it forward on the inserts, and I'm going to go charge ice all day. And the
Yeah.
next day, it's going to be soft powder in the morning, and it's going to be chunky by 10 o'clock. My bindings are going back. I'm rotating back my front foot to 25, my back foot to 12 or 9, and I'm shifting back and I'm going to go to 20 1/4, and
Yeah.
on the same board. And now it's a completely different board.
Mm,
You know, um,
totally.
and like I see a lot of people like when sometimes I'll have people come and they'll buy their board here and they'll come and pick them up and then they want me to put their bindings on it, and we're taking bindings off of their twin tip, and they're like, "Yeah, I want you to put them on exactly the same." I'm like,
No.
"Huh?
Yeah, it happens to
What?"
me. Like I've attended the odd Stranda demo event. Helped out Mats in Europe once, and then did a few things here myself. And yeah, that's always an interesting one when people mount a 170 cheetah carving board with 15 minus 15. You're
Yeah,
why?
yeah.
Why?
Well, opinions are hard to change, right? And people get set in their ways, especially if they've been writing for 30 years and they've been writing the same setup for 30 years.
Yeah.
It's really hard to break those habits, and I tend to do it with people incrementally, if I have the time. I set people up. I'll be, look, I'm going to put you at +5 on the back foot and at 20 on the front foot, right? And then come back in a week and or you do it at your home, and like after every day of riding, move it 3 degrees, both feet, 3 degrees. That's it. You won't even notice it, right?
That's
after 10 days of riding, you're going to be at 18 and 35 for that board.
That's kind of my approach too. I get this question a ton, like twice a day for sure. What do you recommend for stance angles for doing this or that? And it's kind of nonsense because we are all different. We our joints bend differently. Like my right knee tracks inward awkwardly. Like it is what it is. Like all kinds of weird things. And when people come from a heavy duck stance and go posi, I always feel like, nah, don't just throw yourself into it and go gnarly, because literally we are looking. That's two different sports. Like the way, if you want to use your body efficiently, as in let your body follow your stance, then you will be riding with your lower joints in a duck stance much more so than in an aggressive posi stance where lots is in the hips.
Yeah.
Right? Just because the forward motion of your ankles doesn't actually transfer force across the board, but transfers force nose tail, like forward. So well, what gets the board on edge? Well, your hips. And for someone, what always happens is when people jump from the heavy duck stance into a heavy posi stance without a transition phase and wrapping their heads and bodies around it, is that they end up trying to apply duck technique to posi, and it just doesn't work at all. It's just awkward. So like that's definitely a funny one.
And the thing is as well, and so I was like, it took me a long time to learn how to ride at the flattest stance, and I can ride duck. I'm not great at it, but I can ride duck, But with my son, every board I set him up with a different stance, right? Depending on what the board was. So he had a race board as well, right? So his race deck, when he was like 6, he had a race deck, and I had him at like 45, 25 or something like that. And then his blower, I think I had him riding approximately, well, it doesn't matter what he was riding. So now, for example, he's got a carving deck that he rides about 45, 21, something like that. He's got his blower that he's riding about 25, 12, something like that. He's got his twin tip that he's riding about 15 -9 or something like that, right? All different widths. And we'll go to the mountain, and it's perfect groomer, and he'll jump on his carving board, and we will do 3 laps on the carving board, and then he'll be like, and he'll take all 3 of them up to the lift, right, and put them on the rack, And he's like, oh, I'm going to jump on my twin tip. Let's go to the park bit. And he'll jump on his twin tip, and it's not like there's like a 1-run adaptation phase.
Right.
He gets on the board, and the first turn, he's solid.
Yeah.
Right?
That's cool.
Because his whole life, he's ridden different stances for what the board is supposed to do.
That is so good.
Right? Yeah. And then, like in the afternoon, he's like, the park's kind of shitty. Let's go in the woods. And he'll grab his blower, which is also a completely different stance. And there's no transition or adaptation period at all. Because since he was 2, every board was set up the best way to make that board work.
That is awesome to hear. I have to admit, I'm guilty of this too. Like I had my long phase of this is my stance. And it's so limiting. Like I can only advise to not even ever get into this idea of no, this is my stance. It's like, nah, learn how a snowboard works and move with whatever stance you put on whatever board, and understand which stances, like it's fairly obvious that it doesn't make sense to make a true twin with 39, 21 posi. Like that just doesn't make any sense.
Right. Yeah.
It's nothing of that board is meant to give you a benefit through those angles, and vice versa, right? Like it just why on a directional swallowtail with a massive setback, Why would I want my back knee to point backwards? It just makes no sense. The board wants to go one direction and one direction only.
Right. I mean, you can land backwards. You know, I'll throw a 540 or something and I'll land switch, but I don't stay there.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah,
You
yeah.
know?
But just this idea of not pigeonholing oneself and limiting oneself, I think that's so cool. And that makes sense that if you teach or if you bring up a child like that, that they just like whatever, they're just crushing it. They don't care.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
It's,
like
it's natural for them because it's what they know, you know?
totally.
And yeah, I was never like locked into a stance because like even when I was racing, when I was doing Super G, I had a different stance than when I was doing slalom, right? So I had a wider, flatter stance for slalom than I had for when I was doing Super G. And then I would get onto a free carve with soft boots, and I would have a much slacker, wider stance on a free carve board, right? But I was always posy. It was
Mm,
just variations of a posy stance, you know, for me. And it wasn't until I stopped racing that I started riding a little bit of twin. And well, I mean, other than when I first started in the 80s, you know, well, then we were posy as well, but it was kind of like around 90, 91 that we started going duck with more twinish. They weren't quite twins yet, but they were closer to twin.
yeah,
I think I got a Terry Kidwell, a Sims Terry Kidwell, and I set that up duck.
yeah,
It was like -3 +20 or something like that, right? It was
yeah,
just
yeah,
barely duck, right? Um, but then I got into racing and that was the end of it until, you know, like the late 90s or early 2000s that I tried duck,
yeah,
you know, for real.
yeah.
And I was never great at it. I could do it, but
I to like honestly, I try to say that all the time when this discussion comes up. I couldn't care less. Like everybody should do what they want to do,
mm,
and the big takeaway there is that there is no right and wrong. There are different methods, and
mm,
they will produce different outcomes.
yeah,
And you should look at it outcomes based. Like, what do you want to do? Okay, then you should probably try this, right? So
yeah, yeah,
this discussion of like, but so and so rider can carve in a duck stance, so posy is like pointless. It's like, no, like he's
mm,
carving in a duck stance despite the stance, not because of the stance.
right, right,
Not
yeah,
more efficient what he does, but he can do it. And he has a reason because he also carves switch and does all kinds of crazy tricks. So why would he ride posy?
yes,
There's no argument, but people try
mm,
to pick these arguments, right? Like to
mm,
be like, oh, you're wrong because this guy does this. And it's like, no, I'm not trying to be right. I'm trying to explain a point.
right, yeah, 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 absolutely, absolutely. You know, so one of the things that I picked up on because I teach a lot of snowboarding, right? And people are
Uh-huh.
like, well, what? Or when they're buying a board, and like, what should I get? Should I get a twin tip or a directional twin or a, you know, an all mountain twin, or should I get into a posi stance shape-shifted board? And the way I start the conversation with people is it depends what you want to do. Is your goal as a snowboarder, not the snowboarder you are today, you're a beginner, but what is it that drew you to the sport? Why
Nice.
do you want to snowboard? Do you want to skate down the mountain and do lots of really cool skateboard type tricks?
Yeah.
Or do you want to surf down the mountain and carve and make turns like you're surfing on snow? And if you want to surf down the mountain, you go this way. And if you want to skate down the mountain, you go that way. And one is not easier or harder or better than the other. You will learn both of them equally well and with the same challenges and with the same difficulties and the same ease in certain ways. And you're going to have the ups and downs of a curve in your learning. And there is no right way to learn. What is drawing you into the sport? Why do you want to snowboard? Because you saw surfy stuff or you saw skatey stuff, and then
Awesome.
that'll help you go in the direction that you want to go.
I love that.
And it's not a conversation you ever hear. It's not a way of presenting stuff. And I'll go to stores and I'll listen to salesmen sell stuff to people, and invariably the salesman sells the people what they like.
Yeah.
This is how I ride, so therefore everybody should ride this way.
Yeah.
It's
I'm
kind of really.
I would have the exact conversation you just described. Literally the exact conversation
Mm.
with the exact same example too. I would literally ask that question. What do you want to do? Which snowboarder do you think you are? What drew you in? Yeah, totally.
And just because you went in one direction doesn't mean you can't switch later.
Exactly.
You know, like
Totally.
you might have started off thinking you want to surf the mountain and all your friends are in the park and you want to hang out with your friends. Well, you're on the wrong gear. You didn't know that your friends were doing that, but now you do. So you either sell this and get that, or you get both,
Yeah,
depending on
totally.
what your financial abilities
Absolutely.
are, right? Um, you're not. It's not a life-changing decision.
No,
One,
exactly.
you
And
know.
you like you as in you are actually also only answering to a question. They approached you saying, "Well, what do you think should I get? What should I do?" So
Mhm.
you are actually answering with a counter question to make them reflect more on who they are or who they think they are as a potential future snowboarder. So
Yeah.
I think it's all like, well intended, and you're right. After all, you'll figure it out. Like yeah, go down this path. Maybe in 2 years you'll be bored of it, and then you buy a power board or a twin, whatever you got
Mhm.
first. Yeah, totally, man. Like I agree. Soul Stick is solely directional, correct?
No, we have a twin tip kids board.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
so it's a 131. Well, it's an asymmetrical twin. So it's asymmetrical toe to heel, but twin end to end.
Mhm.
And we used to have an adult twin as well. I had a same thing, asymmetrical heel to toe, but symmetrical nose to tail. And we dropped it from the line because it's impossible to sell.
Yeah,
We're such a small boutique brand. And what we found is the kinds of people who want to ride a twin tip want to ride a known brand. And part of the snowboard experience is, oh, you snowboard. What do you have? I have a Burton.
makes
Right.
sense.
That's what they want. Whereas I find that not all, but a lot of the people who want to ride directional boards, they're kind of on the outside looking in type people. They actually like the idea of being on something that their friends have never heard of,
Totally.
as opposed to being on something that their friends have heard of, right?
Yes.
So the fact that they're on a Karua or an Amplet or a Gentem stick or a Moss stick or a Soul stick, right? There's these oddball brands.
Yeah.
Um, it's a point of pride,
Yeah, I agree. And
you
it's
know?
cool. I love that. It's
Yeah, and it's cool, you know? And like I said, I don't have to sell a million snowboards. I'm not Burton,
yeah,
right? If I'm selling close to 1,000, I'm stoked. And there's enough people who want these boutique brands out there to make Soul Stick and two dozen other
yeah.
brands out there like us thrive. You
Totally.
know, we're all doing very, very well.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. It's fun also to have a group of brands, an accumulation of brands sharing that niche. It's cool.
Yeah, yeah. It's not the biggest slice of the pizza, but it's big enough and it's ours.
Yeah, 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 exactly.
And so we dropped the twin tip. We just decided that wasn't, we've got a couple of like they're not directional twins. Like I've got one called the 3D, which is it's the closest thing I have to a twin, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's not.
And
It's
and
very
if
different.
anyone's interested, maybe also to wrap this up, where do we find you? Where can people maybe get more info from you or about the boards?
So Google is your friend. When you Google Soul Stick, there's all kinds of reviews out there from all sorts of people on the various different boards that we have. And what I like about those reviews as well is that some of them they don't all agree with each other.
Yeah,
So some reviewers will absolutely love the blower. Other ones will just find it, yeah, it was nice. I liked it, but I love the shift. And the next person will be like, yeah, the shift was okay, but I really love the blower, or
yeah.
whatever. The shift and the blower are our big sellers. Those are the
Oh,
two that
cool.
really sell. The pitch wing does very well for us. The 3DX does well for us. But those are like and then the Zen, which is our split board,
Yeah,
really does well for us. So soulstick.com is where we are online. We're mostly direct to consumer for the reason that dealers prefer to carry known brands for the most part. It's it's their money and they've got to be wise with it, and I get it. So it's mostly direct to consumer. We ship worldwide.
Yeah.
And like I said, Google is your friend, or soulstick.com.
Cool, man.
Yeah, it's really great chatting with you, and I'm glad that we understand these things.
This chat was awesome, and thank you so much also for sending me the boards. It was a pleasure to try them. And yeah, I mean, I feel like we'll stay in touch in one way or another.
Yeah, I'll send you some video clips that you can use, and have a good winter. Hopefully the boiler turns back to powder soon.
Cool, man. Awesome talking to you. Take care, Corran.
All right, I'll see you.
Bye.
Bye.